Level 2, Musical Meadows. The elevator door slid open with a ding. The darkness seemed to drip into the small space. Simon could see nothing in front of him, so his first instinct was to look down. Simon inspected the clothes he was wearing, and they were different. Simon let out a as he lightly brushed his hands over the outfit. From pure white clothes in the institution to what seemed to be somewhat of a suit. It was colorful, at that, more colorful than what he ever remembered wearing. The coat was navy blue, with a pale yellow lining, with black dress trousers and a white bow tie. Gold moccasins almost made it a little too gauche. Simon ran his fingers through his hair. He thought that something was missing. Something was supposed to be there. Simon wondered why he was even wearing such a ridiculous thing. He's never worn it before, right? Simon continued to inspect it for a moment. That place with the white clothing, was it just... Simon took an unsure breath in. Was that place a dream, or is this? He tugged on his hair strands a little bit. He couldn't remember anymore. Simon gripped the sides of the elevator door, squinting with all his might. He stumbled forward as he tried to walk. Ugh, Simon breathed out as he walked right into a wall. Wall, or... Simon extended his arms, trying to feel what was in front of him. The texture of the wall was like a strange velvet fabric. He touched all around it, trying to get his bearings. Simon ran his hands over the whole thing before it fell through. He felt all around the inside of the newfound hole in the wall. It seemed to be man-made, shaped like a square. It couldn't be more than a couple feet wide. Simon stood back and wondered what on earth he was supposed to do here. He took a peek at the elevator door buttons again, only just to see one for the floor he was currently on and one for level 1. He thought about going back to the first level, but he shook his head as he remembered what happened there. Simon looked ahead, back into the darkness. Well, he began to think. Worth a shot, I suppose. He started by sticking his arm through, reaching deeper into the space just to see if there was anything there. All Simon could feel was that weird texture. It seemed to never end. He looked behind him one more time before shoving his head in. Simon grunted when the box-like shape squeezed his shoulders as he tried to slide through. He held his arms out in front of him, trying to get a grip. Simon dug his nails into the ground and slowly pulled himself forward. It was a bit unnerving, inching inside of a crawlspace that seemed to have no end. Simon bit his lip as he realized he couldn't even turn around in such a confined space. Well, it's not like he would want to anyway. That first floor was creepy. Simon huffed. He continued to push his body forward at an agonizingly slow pace. He wondered to himself when the strange tunnel would end. If it would end. Simon's heart suddenly skipped as the fact that he couldn't turn around and the possibility of the crawlspace never ending connected in his mind. He stopped moving for a second, digging his nails into the velvety floor. Fuck, he muttered underneath his breath. Simon continued dragging himself forward. It seemed to go on for at least a few minutes. 30 minutes? An hour? Simon couldn't see how scuffed his hands were getting, but he could feel his nails split as they pulled his weight. He groaned as his arms fell sore, getting awfully fatigued in that small space. Simon wondered how much distance he had covered already. He strained to tilt his head behind him. Simon looked back down at the dark tunnel and realized he couldn't even see the elevator anymore. He took an unsure breath in as he turned his head back around. Simon continued to inch forward at the speed that would make a snail look like lightning. Mon Dieu, when will it end? He furrowed his brows and rolled his eyes up. Am I just damned to this forever? Is this some sort of hell I have to endure? Why am I even here? Why did this Simon interrupted himself as his fingers brushed against something. He held his hands up and felt whatever it was in front of him. Wall. Simon's heart dropped. A fucking wall? I did this all for a dead end? He immediately felt his face heat up with anger. Simon grit his teeth and sputtered out some choice words. He balled his hand that he just trekked miles with. Skin was chafed, red and sore. Nails were split and broken. Simon took his fist and smashed it into the wall in front of him in a twist of impulsive madness. What? Simon's tight lip fell slack as his jaw dropped in shock. Newfound light flowed into the tunnel, shining right on Simon's eyes. He just sat there, too stunned to move. It seemed that in hitting the wall, he actually knocked it out entirely. And in front of Simon was a whole new world. Hills upon hills rolled under the blue sky. Sunlight shone over the vast verdant grass, making a golden hue gloss over the area. Simon peeked his head out of the now open crawlspace, taking it all in. Fresh air swirled and filled his lungs with each breath he took. Crisp, cool breezes caressed his cheeks. Simon hesitantly stuck his arm out, feeling the air flow between his fingers. He then looked down and realized that the opening to the tunnel was actually a little ways above the ground. Simon sighed and pushed himself towards the opening, wriggling his way out of the confined space. He tried to land softly on the ground, but Simon fell forward, landing face first in a patch of flowers. Before he could even lift his head up, the smell of pollen swirled in his nose. He used his arms to lift himself up slightly, before sneezing at a petal that had been lodged in his nostril. Simon stood up, stumbling for a moment before walking forward. He walked somnambulantly, still in shock from the brand new area that surrounded him. Simon looked back for a moment. He found that the tunnel he had crawled out of was just sort of stuck in the air. Simon shook his head for a moment, not believing what he was seeing. He walked around to the other side of it, but now it looked like the crawlspace had completely disappeared. Simon jumped back around to the front to make sure it was still there. It looked almost as if someone had pasted a black rectangle over a background. Simon furrowed his brows, facing away from the opening and now walking into the fields, seeing what that could bring. It wasn't long before he heard something. Simon stood in place, trying to make out what he was hearing. Long grass danced with the wind and gently wrapped up his ankles, almost embracing him. Music. Simon heard music. It was distinct, he was sure of it. It was the sound of a piano, perhaps a guitar, an acoustic guitar, definitely. Simon transitioned into a steadfast gambol as he followed the sound. The music crescendoed as he got closer. Simon briefly saw two people before he suddenly got a nervous pang in his chest. He ducked behind a nearby rock. Other people? He had never seen other people in whatever this place was, and he was scared to meet them. Previously, he thought that the absence of any being in the last level meant that it wasn't real. Now he wasn't quite sure. It would certainly be an effort for his mind to make up an entire person, let alone two. Was it even possible? Simon tilted his head up over the barrier and peeked at who was there. There were two men, both wearing extravagant outfits. One was sitting on a bench, twiddling his fingers away at a piano. He was wearing primarily green. From coattails to cuffs to slacks, it was all green. Music notes were embroidered all over his ensemble, really completing the look. The melody that flowed from the piano keys was beautiful. It reminded Simon of something. He didn't know quite what it was, but something about the playing piano sparked his memory. Did Simon ever play piano? He silently shook his head as he had trouble thinking. On the other hand, the second man was playing the guitar. He had a similar attire to the pianist, but this time it was all in yellow, although his trousers were rolled up on account of him standing in a lake. Simon blinked for a moment, not even realizing the lake was there until now. It wasn't deep at all, only about ankle high, so the man stood comfortably in it. With the piano and guitar playing together, he made a lovely harmony that was very pleasant on the ears. Simon thought he could rest behind that rock forever, perhaps even take a nap. It was soothing, but he knew he couldn't just stay there for the rest of his life. Simon arched his head over more, trying to make out more things in the area. He was just about to recognize some shapes in the water when the music suddenly stopped. Simon tensed up, his nails digging into the dirt below him. It was a few uncomfortable seconds before one of the men spoke. "We've been waiting for you, sailor." Simon's eyes widened a bit. "Come on out. We can hear you, you know. Simon gripped the rock for support and slowly wheeled himself upright. With the void of the music whimpering out, Simon could only hear his soft breaths. He didn't know which man to look to, but they were both looking straight at him. It was unnerving, despite neither man coming off as threatening. Simon's heartbeat steadily rose, only slightly. He almost tripped when he started walking, which didn't help his nerves. Simon walked up to the bank of the lake, which was to the left of the piano. Finally, we haven't seen you in so long. What? Simon asked. Who are you? The two men looked at each other for a moment before turning back to him. It seemed that the one in yellow was more of a talker than the man in green. My name is Mr. Harmony. His name is Mr. Melody. He looked back down at his guitar, strumming an E note. But why are you here? Simon urged. What are you doing? We just play. That's it? Yes, we just play. Simon took a step back, dumbfounded. His eyes bounced around for a moment before landing on the lake that Mr. Harmony was standing in. Now that he was up close, Simon could see a small, wooden sailboat next to the guitarist. It seemed to glide around the water on its own, despite there not being any waves in the water. Mr. Harmony started off a new song, beginning with E minor, A minor, and G. Mr. Melody followed suit on his piano, matching the tune. They were both humming softly, but not singing. Simon stepped closer to the water and hesitantly reached his hand close to the boat bobbing beside the shore. It gently floated away from him, as if silently rejecting Simon's reach. The two men didn't react to him searching around. They seemed to know Simon personally, more than he knew them, anyway. It was interesting to him that the two men didn't seem disturbed by Simon's presence. They had been expecting him, in fact. He then looked down to the water itself. He found it odd. It looked more blue than average water would be, more dense. He couldn't see Mr. Harmony's feet in the lake. Simon dipped his hand in the substance. The texture was weird. It was somehow thinner than normal water. More like he wasn't touching anything at all. He lightly wondered what this water would taste like before deciding not to try it. Simon pulled out of the lake and wiped his hand on his pants, not wanting to give it a second thought. Simon backed away from the lake and turned to Mr. Melody next. He was sure to stay quiet. He didn't want to disturb the song that he was playing. Simon peeked over the pianist's shoulder and was surprised to see layers of sheet music. Previously, he'd assumed the men were making up their tunes on the spot, but perhaps they just memorized it. He wondered if all this paper was for the same song, or multiple. Looking closer, Simon saw the title of the song was Hymn for the Whale and Swan. The whale and swan? He wondered what was the significance behind those animals in particular, and why they were together. Simon was following along with the notes as his ears picked up the sound. The sheet music read a lot more complicated than the notes the men were actually playing. As Mr. Melody got towards the end of the page, he licked his finger gently, turning the page over. It was charming, to say the least. A smile upturned on Simon's face. A very simple one, but a smile at that. So, what took you so long, sailor? Mr. Harmony suddenly spoke clearly, his intonation flat. Simon broke his attention from the piano to look at the guitarist again. What do you mean? We've been playing here for a while. Where have you been? He continued to play guitar as he talked to Simon, his eyes closed all the while. I don't know. Don't you recognize us? No, I don't. Mr. Harmony clicked his tongue and turned away from Simon, making a swishing noise in the water. Simon was wondering if he was supposed to do something here. Was he supposed to achieve something? What was his intended goal? Simon faced his back towards the musicians, sitting down in the grass. The breeze twirled his curly hair, tickling his scalp. Simon took a deep breath in. He closed his eyes. Breathe. Despite the calming nature of the level, his thoughts tangled in his mind. Am I supposed to remember something? Don't you think you're forgetting someone? I don't know. Simon's heavy lids drew open again. He felt tired. Another deep breath in. Simon thought long and hard about the two men. Where had he seen them before? The soft breeze climbed its way up Simon's body, wrapping him in a sense of coolness. His hands were pale with the weather, but still warm as the golden sun shone its light. Simon reached his hand down to the ground below him. The long blades of grass licked up his skin. He then noticed the patch of flowers resting underneath his moccasins. He held one between his fingers, gently plucking it from the dirt. A daisy. He held the small flower up to his nose, breathing in the scent. It was small, yet so significant at the same time. The daisy had an earthy smell, one that Simon recognized, yet it was different. Simon spun the daisy with his fingers. He set it back down in the dirt. Simon stood up from the ground and turned to the musicians again. A single cloud rolled over the sun, making a dark shadow over them. I think I remember. Mr. Harmony shifted in the water, facing Simon again. I remember being here as a child. I would run over the hills and jump into the flower patches. I would listen to you play all day when no one else wanted to keep me company. You would sing to me, and I would sing back. I would play in the water and the grass, and every day I got to say hello to the sun and goodbye to the sun. At night, I would see the man in the moon. Of course I remember you. The music stopped playing. It was silent for a moment. The clouds slid past the sun, kissing it goodbye as the brightness returned. Golden light lit up their faces. There you are, sailor. Mr. Harmony and Mr. Melody gave Simon a pleasant smile. Then the musicians turned to each other. The guitarist made some gestures with his hands, almost as if he was a conductor. Mr. Melody struck his piano with an E major chord. It rang out for a moment, echoing. Then Mr. Harmony struck the same chord on his guitar. Suddenly both musicians got rapidly quick in their movements. Chords seemed to spring out of their instruments. E, G, A, C. Simon could barely keep track anymore. He stood back in wonder with how beautiful the song was. Then warm feelings of light and happiness embraced him. The cool breeze washed away in favor of something new. Simon watched as literal notes poured out of the guitar and piano. He was awestruck. Simon reached his hand up and felt one of the notes that was flying through the air. It felt real. It felt like a soft fabric, almost the same texture as a bug's wing. The chords swirled around him, as if they were giving him a hug. Simon watched as the music stuck to his coat, instantly leaving an embroidered design. When it was all done, Simon looked back up at the musicians. They smiled at him. Simon smiled back. He was amazed at the entire event that just unfolded, and he was left with a beautiful design on his attire that matched Mr. Harmony's and Mr. Melody's. Come back any time, sailor. You know where to find us. I will. Now, getting back through the crawl space was another story, but it was at the very least reassuring that there was an end this time. Simon reached the elevator, catching his breath as he fell out of the tunnel. He rose up, dusting his coat that was now textured with embroidery. Simon let out a contented sigh as he looked at the elevator buttons. There was a floor 3. Simon pushed the button, hoping that the next floor was just as pleasant as the last.